It looks like it took 29 days from start to finish for these bags to begin to pin. These ones on the top shelf have actually taken the wire off a couple of days ago just to let them start to breathe. And you can see inside that the casing is about 50% or more colonized, which is the usual amount you would do for a cased project. Same with the bottom. And you can see the mushroom pins there. And there's some mushrooms starting there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of the plastic off these bags. And I'm going to trim the plastic off these too. My idea is to leave about that much plastic. Kind of think of how tall the mushroom is going to be, and then at the very top is where you want the caps to develop more. And hopefully that's going to keep a bit more humidity inside of it and maybe give me a more even flush instead of just the edges flushing more. So we'll see. But I'm going to go ahead and set up my humidity in here today because it's dried out a little bit throughout the week. At least it's raining again, but we'll see how that all goes. It has been about a week since these king oysters started pinning, and they're actually looking really good. Here, I'll slide this one out. Lots of fat pins coming up. I don't see any of the problems of a large portion of the pins aborting. You know, that could either be because I'm working from a fresh culture or from the grain block. This one has a bit fewer larger ones. They're all doing pretty good, even though I still had a good bit of pinning on the side. You can see like a large one here coming up, but it doesn't look malformed, so that's good. Yeah, I don't see any deformed ones too like I had on those other king oyster blocks, which leads me to believe that my cultures were just old. See that one in here too. It looks like it's only going to be about 5-6 days before these are ready to pick. Again, I'm not going to let them go really large. I want them to be able to fit into those same 1-pound strawberry containers that I was using for the lion's mane, and not have to cut any mushrooms apart. So let's take a look at these in about a week. This first set of king oysters is getting about done. Looks like I have some similar issues with it that I had with the solidus blocks, where you can see I'll probably have like 3 or 4 mushrooms pop up there, but I got a ton of resting pins or aborts. I think that's probably because, you know, that pin underneath the casing waited too long. But you know, something I'm going to do differently with these is, instead of ripping the entire casing off and starting over, because the casing's still moist and everything is still good and clean down there, and I haven't misted anything once, I'm just going to go ahead and these mushrooms just snap them right out like that. If they take a chunk of the casing, you know, whatever. But that's about the size I'm looking for. Not really any more caps spreading out. You can see how the edges are still turned in. That's not really making hardly any spores. But yeah, I'll package them up about that size. And hopefully once I pick some of these off, what I might do is add just a little bit more vermiculite in between the mushrooms. And then maybe use the garden sprayer too, just to rinse the top of the mushrooms off so the vermiculite isn't sticking on it. But not really going to add too much because the moisture is still pretty good. But I want to see if these resting pins will will develop. Give it another go out. But I mean, most of them are doing about the same, really. And also, these bags, which are made back on the 9th, they're already pinning at under 21 days. They pinned probably about on day 20. But, you know, I let these go to day 29, which leads me to believe that, you know, they're ready to go at day 21, which is so pretty much when they get fully colonized. That's when I need to bring them down here and put a casing on them, and then close it back up. See how that goes. And they are even pinning on the wax paper projects. See some there? I'm just gonna let that go. Yeah, so yeah, once you open the top once, it looks like it's gonna trigger the pin, which, you know, is kind of what you would expect. And yeah, all these ones you can see where I put not as much casing on, well, same amount of casing, but I got them at 2 weeks. Yeah, hardly the casing's hardly colonized on top as well. It shows you that it really wants to pin. So I think probably a thick casing of vermiculite is really just not going to work well with the king oysters, because it's a bit too much for it to push up through. It realizes that there's no nutrition, you know, hardly any nutrition into the vermiculite, so it's not going to grow into it a whole lot if you can avoid it. But that's why I'm trying something else today. Since I've been doing a lot of coconut coir projects with my plants, coconut coir is also an excellent medium for mushrooms. Here, let's get this down. Some better light. It definitely holds a lot more water than vermiculite. I think that could be what makes it turn out to be a better casing medium. Now, of course, coconut coir has nutrition in it, and you can actually use it as a bulk substrate like straw and things like that. But because it holds so much moisture, you even use it like a casing. And just for this mountain here, really it wasn't that much dry coconut coir, but I probably added 2 gallons of water into it. You can see it's not dripping or anything, but if I squeeze it, the water just runs out. So normally that wouldn't be ideal. That would be above what you would call field capacity, where it should just be a small stream of water that comes out right at the start, and then it drips a little bit and stops. So that's a lot of water for the mushrooms to grab. And I think that'll be better. So I'm going to use about, well, I'll case half of them with about 1 inch of it on top, and then I'll case half of them with a bit thicker casing, about, you know, what I used originally for the vermiculite on these grain blocks. And hopefully what's going to happen when I close the bags up is that the grain block will know, or the mycelium in the grain block will know that there's more nutrition there, so it'll grow into it, probably fully colonize it, and hopefully pin right off that instead of pinning underneath it. Here are 4 of the blocks where I used the wax paper. You can see, well, 2 of them I used the wax paper. These 2 back here, I only added enough casing to cover the block, you know, only about a couple cups of vermiculite. And you can see pins all over. There's a good one starting right there. And of course, since it's thin, there's no pinning underneath the casing. So that looks good. And then you can see the wax paper. See all the pins. See them right over here, right below the paper. It's all very wet inside still. Kind of push that back up against the side of the plastic. But I can see underneath the wax paper. Can you see all those little bumps of pins starting up underneath the paper? And same way for this one. I can actually see a lot of mycelium growing out in between the paper and the plastic. So I'm just going to leave these like that with the wax paper right over it and wet. You know something too, I just thought if that wax paper ever gets dried out, I can probably just safely mist it and re-wet the top of it and never even really get the grain block underneath of it dripping wet at all. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put a section of wax paper on these two to see how well that keeps the humidity in and see if it'll push it out. Interested to see which one does better. Here's the inside of the bags that I cased at 2 weeks with the same about 2 inches thick of vermiculite casing. You can see how much, you know, thinner towards the center because of course the center mounds up a little bit. But just starting to pin on the top with pins, you know, down here. So again, maybe, you know, I'm getting that casing on there too thick and it's delaying it. Something I just noticed that, well, one issue that where I had not had any instant coffee and used regular coffee grounds in with my soaking of the grain, which led to little flakes of coffee being up on the sides of some of these blocks. I saw that a little bit of mildew got onto those pieces of coffee on some of them, so I had to wipe that out. These were all wax paper blocks. And I had to remove the wax paper too, probably because of the stuff on the sides. It too was getting a little bit spot here and there of mildew. But you can see all the pins underneath of it. So I'm just going to put a fresh piece of paper on there. And I think, you know, maybe what I actually should be doing, prevent any chance of the wax paper itself getting mildewy, is to just open the bag, close it back up with no casing or anything on it, wait till I see pins, and then once the bag is open completely, put a wet piece of wax paper on top. And that way, once the top is open, there's no chance the wax paper is going to get mildewed.